Hey everyone, welcome back to the Beat Your Genes podcast. This is episode number 325, and in today's episode, Dr. Lisle and Dr. Howk answer a question about managing an 8-year-old who overreacts and has frequent outbursts. Our second question is about the ego trap, what it is and what can motivate or demotivate someone to achieve their goals. And our final question is a listener asking about their very disagreeable aunt. So let's see what Dr. Lisle and Dr. Howk have to say about all this. We'll see in the video.
I gotcha.
How are the trees going, Jen?
It's getting into, tomorrow's February, which is fantastic because that means the month after February is March.
Okay, cool.
And even though it is
learn something new every day.
Even though it is a leap year, it's shorter, so that's good too. So yeah, February is very good tree planting time generally. It's a lot of places will send their trees in February, and yeah, you want to get things established before it gets too warm and dries them out. So
all right,
planting lots of trees with good damp soil, good conditions. If I get sunny days, I'll be definitely over there planting.
All right, Nathan. Well, what else we got a list of questions?
Yeah, we got some fun questions this week, and I'm hoping you guys both can wind out and take as much time as you need. So our first question: Dear doctors, help. My son just turned 8, and he has acquired part of his personality from my mother. He can be loud, he'll overreact, he'll get really angry about things. And this includes being told that he needs to stop an activity because we are leaving the house, etc. I'm trying to help him manage these outbursts because kids are starting to make fun of him at school for them. Do you have any specific strategies that would help, or should I focus more on his diet and sleep? He's normally a sweet boy, and these outbursts have improved with age, but I feel like he needs more support.
Okay. My first reaction is neither Jen or I as a parent.
Hey, Peaches counts.
Yeah, that's right.
Does she have outbursts?
She does.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Oh,
Wow.
sure. Dogs have, yeah. Not of this type, but yes.
Yes. I would. My first take is that essentially, I actually don't know. A couple of things. I actually had a communication with a psychologist that I got confidence in recently about childhood issues with sort of kids with different sorts of problems, and her response was, "Yeah, these kids don't engage in therapy, for God's sakes. The only therapy that we have is for the parent, maybe, you know what I mean? So maybe the parent can manage things a little bit better." So the my first take is this is the kid's personality, and so this is potted plant theory all the way down. So whatever the circumstances are that may consistently give rise to this, you might want to anticipate those and then try to maneuver your way around them if you can. But yeah, I think also things of this nature tend to get not just a little better with age, but a lot better with age. So we're probably going to see the same characteristic at age 25, but it's going to be, much more narrowly elicited, and there will be all kinds of fancier inhibiting mechanisms as a more complicated brain runs a cost-benefit analysis on the social costs of that kind of thing. So at 8 years old, hey, hell with it. It's all about what it is that I want, and if anybody's in my way or bossing me around or trying to stop me from doing it, then if I throw a little tantrum, maybe I get my way. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not seeing that there's, and also, by the way, the dad's or mom's concern about kid being embarrassed, like, so what? Like, this is your Stone Age brain worried about his long-term reputation in some mating village of 35 people, but he's not in a mating village of 35 people. So if he winds up with some degree of socially negative feedback in the next 2, 3, 4 years because he's got some quirky instability in his personality, I mean, so be it. And
he can always start a podcast when he gets older and make friends that way.
always start a podcast when he gets older and make friends that way. And he can always start a podcast when he gets older and make friends that way. And he can always start a podcast when he gets older and make friends that way. And he can always start a podcast when he gets older and make friends that way. And he can always start a podcast when he gets older and make friends that way. And he can always start a podcast when he gets older and make friends that way. And he can always start a podcast when he gets older and make friends that way. And he can always start a podcast when he gets older and make friends that way. And he can always start a podcast when he gets older and make friends that way. And he can always start a podcast when he gets older and make friends that way. And he can always start a podcast when he gets older and make friends that way. And he can always start a podcast when he gets older and make friends that way. And he can always start a podcast when he gets older and make friends that way. And he can always start a podcast when he gets older and make friends that way. And he can always start a podcast when he gets older and make friends that way. And he can always start a podcast when he gets older and Yeah, how's that working out, Nate?
That's all right. Yeah.
So anyway, that's what I'm thinking. Jen, what thoughts do you have?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you, and I think it's unlikely to be something you want to drag him into therapy for. And it's really just, yeah, a combination of the distortion of worrying about how it's going to affect him at school and being bullied, and those are social calibrations that are beyond your control, no matter what's going on with him. And I guess the specifics, I mean, there probably are ways as a parent that you can handle specific situations a little differently. It's hard to tell from this question, but if he's having a tantrum about leaving the house, sort of maybe spending some time talking through why are you so upset about leaving the house, and allowing him to process a little bit of that, rather than shut up and get in the car. I'm sure you're not doing that, but there's probably a big continuum of how to interact with him and allow him to feel a little like he's discharged some of that and gotten through it and been offered some solutions. But yeah, I think generally what Doug is saying is he's testing out some new strategies of communication and figuring out how to deal with what he should do to get more resources when he doesn't get the resources that he's expecting, or they're withheld from him. And a lot of that is just a calibration process that everyone's going to go through in their own way. So you just kind of hold that audience for him and support him and give him alternatives without giving in or totally invalidating his claim. And that's going to just be really specific to whatever's going on with him in the moment.
Wonderful.
Yeah, all good.
Yeah. I had when I was a kid, I had a tantrum calendar for, you wouldn't know this now, but I was the tantrum queen. And there was like how many days in a row can you go without throwing a public tantrum? And then if you could actually make it that number of days, there was some sort of prize at the end, which I never found out what that was because I never got that far. Yeah, I would not recommend that strategy.
Yeah.
There are probably other ways to do it, but I know it's really frustrating for parents to try to manage this and to try to also help the child to develop more sustainable strategies to deal with big feelings. That's a tough thing.
Yeah.
I had a family member growing up, and they had, for their kids, they had like a display case of all these toys, and that it was like you're at a carnival. And so if they behaved well, they accumulated points and they could get all these toys one at a time. So
yeah, that was
Good
kind
luck.
of the idea behind the tantrum calendar.
Yeah.
It doesn't really, kids are discounting the future too much. It's we're all failing the marshmallow test in every direction. So not.
Now I can imagine that a parent might say, well, how long do I have to wait? Like when will their brain kind of kick in and start to not show this and embarrass me in public? What would you say to somebody thinking that?
One bowl of oatmeal at a time, one day at a time, few more neurons. It's like too bad, but I can remember watching Gar Goldhammer at 4 or 5 years old. Oh my God, unbelievably difficult to deal with. But by 15, he was quite reasonable, even though he remains to this day, evolved a little volcano that can go off under the right circumstances. But so I watched over a period of 10 years something that was very difficult to deal with, and then little by 10, he was better than when he was 5, and when he was 12, he was better than he was 10. So such is life. You're just watching. Essentially, what you're watching is the growth of more and more of the ability of the brain to run a cost benefit analysis that is more encompassing of everything that they have learned about what the payoff matrix is for the behavior. So they're not able, as Jen says, to compute that very well at all. At 8 years old, they can, but they don't compute it very well. And then they're going to get increasingly good at computing that. They're both going to learn, and they're also going to naturally be able to run more complex CBs. Both of those things are going to be happening at the same time. So sorry, it's just an unknown emergence of self-control that may never emerge.
I think developmentally that threshold between 8 and 9 is a big one, because I was a pretty good little correlation machine and schemer by 9, and
Yeah.
that I wasn't at 8. At 8, it's still very reactive, still very, you're still a child, but at 9 you're turning into a little adult, and you're much more inhibited, and that's good and bad, because you maybe are responding to incentives in your environment that are not great, and you're giving adults what you think they want, which is probably not always great, but you are more you're more
Or
attuned.
Machiavellian.
Yeah, you're definitely more Machiavellian.
Right. That's
in my
good.
case,
That's a good thing.
in my case, by age 9, I mean that's when I was, had my ego trap with the
Right.
model rockets, and like that.
Right.
By that age, I'm definitely calculating.
Yes.
How do I work this situation to my advantage, and if that means modulating my emotional response to something, that was part of the calculus, including, should I exaggerate an emotional response to something?
Right.
So probably at 8, he's really starting to play around with some of those different strategies and make that transition, which is going to be a different thing now than whatever it's going to turn into by 9 or 10. We don't know what that looks like, but where he's at now is probably not very stable in terms of what you're going to be seeing long term.
Wonderful. Dr. Howk, thanks. I'm glad you brought up the ego trap, because the next question is actually about the ego trap. So I wonder if both of you can wind out on the ego trap after I read this next question.
Sure.
And tell us what your thoughts are, and then maybe share your ego trap about the model rockets. That sounds interesting. So, dear doctors, is there anything that is the opposite of the ego trap when you have been repeatedly told negative things like that you're worthless and will never amount to anything? If the ego trap is demotivating, is hearing the opposite motivating? If so, can it also be extremely demotivating as well, especially if your mind is doing a cost-benefit analysis of the possibility of success and whether the energy output is worth it, but the people around you are saying that you won't succeed?
Yes. So what the ego trap is a case where the social costs have ridden higher than the benefits. So that is so you can imagine, like, if thank God it's only a few minutes in and I'm already doing a sports analogy. This is fantastic. So if you're the heavyweight champion of the world, but you're pretty sure that the number 1 contender can beat you, and so but the world doesn't think so, because you've won 7 fights in a row and you look very dominant. But you and your coaches and your analysts are looking really hard at this situation, and you actually believe, as much arrogance as you have for being the world heavyweight champ, you actually remember fighting that guy 3 years ago when he was kind of a young cub, and remembering how hard he hits and thinking, he doesn't quite know what he's doing yet, but this one's going to be trouble. Okay. So now it's 3 years later, and now you're looking at this thing and you're thinking, I'm not so sure. So now the ego trap is, I'm going to avoid it. So now we're going to find a way to delay, defer, hide behind lawyers. In other words, we're going to do everything we can to not get in that ring effectively. That's the ego trap. However, let's suppose that on the other side of it, that you are a young fighter and you think you could take the champ, but everybody starts telling you can't. Okay, so now this is the other side of it. Everybody's telling you there's no way, you're not ready, you're not ready, you're not ready, you're not ready. Okay. Now what is that going to do? All that is that's going to, as this person talked about, the key variable there is perceived probability of success. So under the perceived probability of success, the gain, the ego trap is about the loss in an equation of profit and loss. In other words, the ego trap is, the gain would be if I went and accomplished this, I'm the world heavyweight champ, and I go in there and I win. Okay, it's been reaffirmed and I made a big check and I'm still the champ. But the loss is, I could lose, and nobody expects me to lose. So if I do lose, the status loss is catastrophic. Okay. So the ego trap is when the losses get bigger than any potential gains. And now we are in a stop sign motivational process. Get out of this thing, whatever it is, like Jen's bottle rocket or her rocket thing. The losses were greater than the potential gains, so therefore I'm out. Okay. The other side of it is, what if the perceived probability of success of the gain is low? So we're fine with whatever the losses might be. Yeah, okay, nobody expects me to win, so therefore I'm not in the ego trap. But what if my perceived probability of success is so low that there's a time and energy expenditure that is so great that it's like, that's not worth doing. I.e., don't try to be a doctor. There's no way you can do it. So, oh, I'm off to college. I'm thinking I want to be a doctor. And everybody around says, hey, sorry, chief, you don't have the IQ. I mean, people don't talk that way. I could just see myself as a guidance counselor at a junior college. No,
Fun social experiment.
hell.
I want to write a movie script on spec about that like Coach Doug. Yeah, the shattering dreams.
Yeah, shattering rightly and correctly and lovingly shattering dreams. I wouldn't want you to waste your time.
The name of the movie is going to be called Realistic Expectations.
There
Yeah,
you go. Very good. Very good.
There you go. That's beautiful, Nathan.
That's a little nicer than mediocre expectations.
Fantastic. So anyway, that's the story. So the potential gain is the person is absolutely running a cost benefit analysis, and that it's the gain multiplied by the perceived probability of success. And so, and one of the ways we arrive at a probability of success is by social input. Okay, so I think that what happens, the lore that comes out of this is that people will look back at their life and say, oh, well, my dad discouraged me and did do this, and nobody gave me any confidence, and that's where it all went wrong. It's like, yeah, that actually is not how life works. It works that way in the short term, potentially, but it doesn't work that way generally in the long run. Now, I have run into people who certain aspects of their existence, even at age 40, they were underestimating something about themselves. And so that's a joyful process to be able to say, wait a second, I think you're actually underestimating yourself. I think you could probably do this and do that. And so you can see that through whatever historical process, usually not somebody browbeating them, but through some historical process and essentially natural sensitivity or some sort of some early losses in a domain, they could actually be underestimating their competitive chops. And so, but usually what happens is that the perceived probability of success of anything is a pretty complicated matrix of information. And it's unlikely that we have some information of our own experiences or observing other people that we have judged as similar to us that are succeeding. And yet somebody close to us that's important, our dad or coach or, principal or somebody saying, no, you can't do it. It's like, yeah, human beings aren't going to be believing that all that often. In other words, I've got disparate data points here, and I'm actually not so sure you're right. My own eyes are telling me that I don't think you are right. And so I've got different opinions about this that I pull from people. But the most important data set is probably, there are two more important data sets than information from the outside. And that is that you're almost nothing that you ever do is completely independent of a domain that you have never done anything. So in other words, you're like, well, I was too afraid because my dad said never to ask out a girl, unless she was already given me positive feedback, so that's why I never did it. It's like, yeah, you could say that that's true, but the truth is you've got natural natural human instincts that tell you that when girls stare at you a little extra long and smile, that's a good thing. You know what I mean? You already know that intuitively. So it doesn't really matter what the hell your dad says. That you already actually have evidence from your direct experience. So before you ever asked a girl out when you're 16, you had all kinds of evidence from age 4 about your perceived probability of success in this domain. And so you had many data points that were going into the calculation of a risky proposition finally at 16 years old. And so the same thing is true about whether you can go to med school. Really? Like you weren't paying any attention in trigonometry in 10th grade, how well you did relative to everybody else? Of course you were, okay? Yeah, you're unbelievably sophisticated at analyzing your IQ and your capabilities scholastically. You're incredibly good at analyzing your athletic capabilities relative to everybody else. So where exactly is it there's this goal that you are devoid of any calibration about where you stand relative on a bell curve, and you can't manage to observe people and analyze honestly what other people relative to you are doing and how well they're doing it. And you can't calculate that, but some nasty parent or nasty coach or somebody comes along and says X, Y, Z about you, and that just blows your ability to run an accurate cost-benefit analysis out of the water. Not common. Okay.
More common for some people than others, and I think more common for females than males. I think girls who are sort of more beholden to what men in positions of power think about them and how they estimate their abilities. They may have some sort of idea in the background that, well, I thought I could do it, but if alpha says I can't, then culturally and biologically there's a stronger influence there, and so and that's going to be a continuum for everybody, including males, but I think overall those distributions are different.
Dr. Howk,
yes, yeah, go ahead.
If the leader is kind of signaling to them that they won't get very much status with them if they achieve this goal, would that actually affect their motivation? Not necessarily that it's a gender thing, it's just that the perceived the payoff would not be very high because they're not getting the status that they want from the leader, right?
Yeah, I think that's going to have a chilling effect as well. So, which is a sort of a variety of what I'm inferring that women are going to be receiving more often than men in general, especially young women who are ascendant or who are trying to calibrate out there in the market.
Right. It would be I would
less of that pushback testosterone you're describing, like, oh well, F you, I know how I did in trigonometry and I'm going to be just fine. Like women are walking around with less of that for all kinds of reasons.
Super interesting. That is it. Now I will argue then with respect to almost any goal that anyone is attempting to achieve, they've got an awful lot of evidence about what their perceived probability of success is. So and most of the time, most goals are they're not a one-time thing in life. In other words, there's you've got multiple opportunities, and you can, if someone bends your direction for a little while, you can generally bend it back. But I'm thinking of a person that I talked to in the last year. This was super interesting, that they had done a more liberal arts type of degree, woman, more liberal arts type of degree, and had put themselves in a financially kind of not too great of a position of power by mid-30s. And I had talked to her 2 or 3 times. Very bright, capable person that was doing something that they didn't really like to do, and was a derivative of a liberal arts degree. And finally, I could tell that they actually had they actually had quite a bit of disagreeability. So quite a bit of disagreeability and quite a lot of IQ. And at one point, I actually said, hey, what about law school? Like, have you ever thought about anything like that? And she had thought about it, but it felt like, wow, that's, it's a lot of work. And I think just a lot of little feelings like maybe I was what we were going over was, hey, I kind of missed the boat because I did this liberal arts thing. And all of us know that all of us in and around academia know that the trash can place to go to grad schools, law school, they'll take anybody. Like you don't need any undergraduate degree other than a BA in basket weaving. That's fine. You go to law school, i.e., you don't learn anything in an undergraduate that has anything to do with law school. You could make the argument that, I studied political science, so therefore I know about the three branches of government, whatever the hell. But the truth of the matter is, people go to law school with absolutely no connection to anything previous to law school, where that's impossible in med school. So the impossible in engineering. You're not going to a graduate degree in civil engineering unless you got an undergraduate degree in civil engineering. So I said that to her, and she it was very quick. It was less than a 40-second uptick in that little head. It was like, suddenly a little periscope went up inside the system, thinking, well, now wait a second. And I think part of it, Jen, is interesting. It was if nobody else is actually around encouraging something that is a major intimidating thing, and you're a female that's been sort of slotted into this sort of social science thing, and you haven't had actually the kind of killer mentality because you weren't thinking, I need to make a bunch of money and put a knife between my teeth so that I can have a wife and children that I'm supporting. So instead she just sort of takes the easy route in a social science thing, but actually she's got more chops than that and didn't quite identify enough about herself to know which direction to go. I haven't talked to her since, but I feel as a result of this conversation, I'm pretty sure that a fire was lit. As I recall, as we ended that conversation, it's like, whoa, sea change. You know what I'm saying? And that would be an example of sort of a female, a woman with potential out there in the marketplace that was kind of hiding underneath some of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So just as beholden to permission from Alpha as she is sort of subdued by discouragement from Alpha.
Absolutely.
And so there's a lot of contingency in the life of a young woman of who she runs into and how she's encouraged or discouraged. And so it can really, silo her into a life that she kind of looks around one day is how did I get here?
Right. Yeah, I think actually, if we think about this, but if I take this back to, sub-Saharan Africa 25,000 years ago, this problem isn't nearly as significant as it can be today, in the sense that there aren't great forks in the road that result in major differences in socioeconomic status. So there are not problems that are complicated that you're going to have to jump through hoops to get there. So as a result, human beings naturally, this wouldn't have been a major significant problem, in a hunter-gatherer society. But in a modern environment, you could absolutely see that you could have little, every now and then a discouraging alpha, negative, etc., could actually wind up nudging somebody despite some curiosity and some belief that they could go a given direction. Yeah, you could have that. This is straight self-efficacy theory right out of Bandura. So in other words, the three chief sources of information that dominate self-confidence are: have I done it before? What have relevant other people that look like me, how have they done? I.e. role models or anybody that's that's similar enough that we can track them and use them as a proxy experiment for our goal. And finally, what do relevant to other people have to say about it? What do people that we respect their opinions? Those are the three chief sources of information that will calculate out to perceived probability of success. And yeah, Jen makes a great point here that there's going to be personality differences, and in those personality differences, there's going to be probably a pretty significant gender issue sitting under this. Yeah, from my standpoint, I don't feel it. You know what I mean? If I think I can do it and you say I can't do it, I couldn't give a damn about what it is that you have to say.
It's your white male privilege, Doug. Just got to interrogate that privilege and step outside of it. But yeah, I mean, I
Yes.
think I've been on both sides of the encouragement, discouragement. I mean, in my, I think it's not uncommon. I think it's quite common. And yeah, it's an interesting sort of accidents of where you find yourself and who your mentors are and like what, you know, just how that all shakes out. People don't have a lot of control over some of the things that are turned out to be very important for some of us, more than others, I think.
Man, interesting. All good. Good. Hey, well, we dug and found some good things on that question.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, Nathan. What else
do you
we
know,
got?
is it known, as far as gender differences and ambitiousness are I'm assuming that, you know, men will be more ambitious because there's way more to lose because than women will be. But what's your thoughts on that? The gender differences there?
Oh, that's interesting. My first take is that there's a huge difference, and there are places where you see those huge differences. And it's not so much to lose. It's all about resource acquisition one way or the other. So, but you can see a massive effort being put forth by many males to try to acquire tremendous amount of resources and status in order to have a lot more mating options and basically to dominate a gene pool if they can. So that is absolutely true. Now, the curiosity is that if you look at income numbers in education, the males don't, they've been sniffing that education is not any big win for them here in the last 20 years. And so they're not investing heavily in getting higher educations, and they're not actually out earning females at this point. I don't know. Do you know what I think it's, I mean, I checked something, it might be the top 25% of females versus the top 25% of males. The median income for those two groups of people, females, are higher. Not necessarily the averages, because the men, you know, are more likely to be CEOs making $80 million a year for somebody. But what's going through your head, Jen? I know you're thinking about something.
Yeah, we looked this up recently because we were thinking of men instead of investing in that educational process, because yeah, way more women in general getting advanced degrees, you know, getting degrees in general, including bachelor's degrees, but also masters and PhDs, not uniformly in every field. So there still are fields that are totally dominated by either gender. And there is a little bit of a pay differential there. So, you know, civil engineering is still more men, and sort of education is still more women, et cetera. So you've got to shake out a lot of the data there. But it did look as if when we were looking at it that men were sort of building businesses from the ground up, investing in businesses that without necessarily that educational background. And that I think if you did, I remember something about that, we'd have to look it up, but that top 25 median sounds right, but probably not the top, you know, 2% or something. There's probably still a big difference there.
So that's super interesting. But I believe, in other words, if you look at certain characteristics culturally, looking, you know, you can look way out at the extremes. So you're going to see that that there's going to be a lot more young men that are going to work incredibly hard to try to become professional athletes. Okay, so I mean, there's professional athletics in women, and there's young women that are trying to be professional athletes, but they don't. The sheer quantity of humanity and the tremendous amount of effort that's involved in trying to get to super high levels of skill and physical fitness, it's not there. Now you might say, well, the incentives aren't there. You can't make $10 million a year in the WNBA. So that we would have to look at. But if we looked at in the music industry, for example, we're going to find way more albums are cut by men. And this is, books written. That would be an interesting one, because women would feel a little less aced out, I think, of that than necessarily the pushiness and grandstanding that men are trying to get on stage and grandstand. They're absolutely they're trying to get that done. So music is I think it's not. I don't even think it's even close. We certainly respect or there's no difference in people's liking for listening to female versus male artists at all. I think I looked into that, and I don't think there's any preference at all as far as that goes. But I think when you look at the sheer quantity of effort, I don't think it's close. I think the males are probably 10-1 in terms of how much time and energy goes into production of music. So what are we looking at there? You're looking at testosterone, dominance hierarchy climbing, grandstanding, in order to dominate gene pools to give themselves a much better situation. Women simply do not have that upside. There's no great upside to it. They can only be pregnant once a year. They cannot cause 10 pregnancies a year. And that fundamental difference in biology is driving those differences in ambition that we at least see at the extremes. I don't know what we're seeing in the middle of the curve. That I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, it's one of those questions we probably should have at the beginning defined our terms with ambitious. What do
Right.
we mean by ambitious? I mean, I think women can be plenty ambitious within their domain. Plenty of vicious competitive strategy and backstabbing and
Right.
hierarchy, dominance climbing.
Right.
But yeah, it's if you're operationalizing it by income or by balcony access, yeah, then everything that we're talking about stands, I think.
That's grand. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of line of thinking in my head got triggered by Jen's comparison to the different genders. So it got me thinking: do men and women seek status differently? Which, of course, I'm sure they do. But then, would that mean that they get into ego traps differently? So men can get an ego trap because they're being told they can't do something, whereas if we can understand what the women's kind of goal is to, women aren't trying to I'm just kind of thinking they might be status climbing, but also trying to secure a mate. And it's just like that can be kind of counter to each other's goals.
I'm not quite sure what he said. There's a question or a comment in there somewhere, Dan. I can't quite find it.
I think the main question is the ego trap different for men than it is for women fundamentally? And I don't think so. I think it's still emanating from that same gap of perceived social cost versus self-efficacy. Is that going to play out in different ways more commonly for women than it will for men? Maybe. I mean, we could talk through that and come up with all sorts of different caveats there. But I think it's pretty much the same thing, the same social forces. But with some interesting specifics when it comes to how men are displaying versus how women are displaying.
He's got some thread in there that he talked through that there's a pony in that BS in there somewhere. That's all right. You've lost it.
No, actually, Jen, when you verbalized it better, it's like, okay, that's what I was trying to say. So,
that was the essence of what I heard.
So translator, thank you.
But yeah.
Of course, the verbally articulate lady, translates for the socially awkward engineer. So
as should be. That's how we all should be. All right, let's. What else we got, Nathan?
All right, our next question. Dear doctors, I have an aunt who is solipsistic, doesn't inquire about anyone else, and is very disagreeable. Sitting across the table from her, it's difficult to understand how someone can be so blind to the life of others and so narcissistic. She's divorced by 2 prior husbands. Is disagreeable behavior like this related to the theory of mind module? And if so, can you describe the various demarcs on the theory of mind bell curve?
Um, you, feel free, Jen. Okay.
I mean, yeah, this just sounds like straight personality all the way. I mean, I think I got sort of thrown off by the idea of solipsism. So just to be a little pedantic about that, like, I don't think she's actually completely solipsistic. I don't think there's nothing outside of her that exists. But she's very self-focused. Everything's coming back to her. Everything's, in terms of her interests, and that she's just not curious about other people's experiences. And so you're really just describing intense disagreeableness. So yeah, I'm not sure what to add to it other than maintain your disagreeable distance and proceed accordingly.
Yeah, I would say they're asking about the theory of mind. So that's actually an interesting question, and there's a little area here that's not like I've read very much on. Jen has read more on personality probably than I have, and is interested in the nuances that Jordan Peterson brings up in these things. So but to my way of thinking, there is a very interesting issue about the theory of mind module that is correlated, but it isn't the same thing as agreeable, disagreeable. But there is a correlation coefficient here that exists, and that is that if you are very agreeable, you are tracking other people's thinking and you're very sensitive to it. You're trying to anticipate it. You're essentially anticipating signals of conflicts of interest. In other words, your theory of mind, you are working very hard trying to see the world through other people's eyes, okay? If you're very disagreeable, generally, you're relatively obtuse about the fact that your cost-benefit analysis as you see it is so different than the cost-benefit analysis that they see it, and you're running into a conflict, and your attitude is, what the hell is wrong with you? I deserve the nice table. What is the problem? We have, Jen and I have a disagreeable friend, and one of his comments is like, they're here for me. Like, what good are they?
Yeah.
What good is the waitress if she doesn't do what it is that I want her to do, for God's sakes? Like, he really does. It's amazingly how much he sees. It's not the guy does. It's not that he doesn't have any empathy. He has empathy highly selected in different situations. He can be very empathic about his cat. Okay. But it's amazingly how unempathic he is about all kinds of conflicts of interest that might result in his banging around the universe, doing the trades of the normal human being in a day. And I look at that, and that I will often be made uncomfortable by how it is that he's treating, other individuals. And so their disturbance and distress have very little meaning to him. So that means his mental machinery, the theory of mind module, lives as an empathic mechanism. That's how it operates. It's operating through probably literally sheer quantity of mirror neurons. And so I believe that we're going to find that highly disagreeable people have vastly fewer mirror neurons than people that are highly agreeable. So it's not, yeah, I think that's the big thing. You can be, if you're highly intelligent, and you also have enough conscientiousness, you can track other people. You can probably, this was the whole theory of sociopathy that was presented by Cluckley in The Mask of Sanity 50 years ago, was that sociopaths, which he considered to be like an alternative form of human, in other words, not seeing this as a bell curve. So they didn't know enough at that time to understand that they were so confused by other people's reactions and behavior, because it was not what they would do, that they would see reactions, for example, of somebody looking at, stepping on a kitten and saying, "Oh my God, you poor thing." And the sociopath, i.e. highly disagreeable individual, is looking at that and thinking, why on earth are they having that reaction? That's bizarre. They didn't have any empathic reaction about the kitten squeaking. And so as a result, a lot of times these individuals will actually experiment with animals and cause them pain because they're trying to figure out what on earth is it about this that's disturbing other people. And they're kind of taking them. So what they're doing is they're slowly trying to build a mental map through learning about how is it that I'm supposed to be acting under situation X and Y and Z, that so that I can mimic it as if I'm a normal person. Because it's going to be very important that I mimic that at times, because I can lose resources if they find out that I'm not having that reaction. Okay. And so this becomes, i.e., the mask of sanity. The notion is that these people are, in Cluckley's view, they are morally insane.
They're mimics. They're basically mimics. They've learned what empathy looks like, but it's not emanating from them.
That's right. And so that's the absurdity.
It's disturbing to meet them because you can tell that they're faking it.
Yeah.
It's creepy. You know what I mean? I've met quite a few people in that top 1 or 2 percentile for those characteristics. And it's, you find out pretty quickly you are not safe. Okay. They can present something that's a cost benefit to you that looks reasonable, but it turns out you're vulnerable and they're going to have no problem chopping your head off as soon as it's convenient to them. So
let's just keep in mind that that's everyone at a high position in politics, by the way, that no one is ascending past a certain point of local dog catcher without having that dark triad to some degree. And so, no one is your friend.
Right there.
They're just good actors,
Right. Yeah. I.e. highly disagreeable.
Yeah.
And ultimately, so I think that's, I'm seeing the theory of mind module, what we see in it as, it would be interesting to know, and someday somebody may know, just by looking at PET scan imaging of looking at little puppies or whatever, we may find out that this is all, that it's 100% of the variance is just mirror neurons. I'm just hugely speculating, but I believe that is a huge percentage of the variance in terms of what it is that we're talking about.
Yeah, that correlation is strong enough. It might not be perfect because of all of this sort of other characteristics that we're talking about here, but it's strong enough that you can basically just equate narcissism with disagreeableness.
Right.
They really are effectively the same in the way that we talk about them, which is what you're dealing with here.
Yep. Really big time narcissist. Just all this. That's a 99th percentile. That's a plum and special.
Yeah. Well, not unlike our friend.
Yes. All right, one more, Nathan.
One more quick one. I've got a hard stop, but just after.
You got a hard stop. Okay.
Oh,
we'll do a
this is a pretty long question though. So then we will reconvene. How about in a couple of weeks?
Oh, well, I didn't mean to deprive us. Are there no short ones?
Let's see here. Okay, here's one. In episode 321 on processed stimulation and social media, this was extremely eye-opening. Could you please get into more detail on how this affects society and people in their daily lives? I feel as if society is heading to a dark place with this.
That's a short question.
That's a short question. Well, the question itself is short.
The
but
number of words
answer-
was short.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
Jen Hawk needs a half an hour on that.
I mean, it's a whole episode in itself.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we'll
Okay.
pass on that one.
We'll pass then. Well, how about we end it here and we'll go without any rush next time. That's it for this episode. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Please make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe to our channel, as it helps us out a ton. And if you're a new listener and you like what you see, you like what you hear, and wanted to listen to some older episodes, you can hear them on any major podcasting platform like iTunes, Spotify, or Libsyn, or you can just go to beatyourgenes.org. Have a good one, and we'll see you all next time.